So how do we maintain a fair expectation when it comes to achieving academic success? And on the same note, since we're so exam orientated, how do we develop and nurture that inquisitive spirit in children so that they develop a love for learning? And I think this question would definitely be posed to Julie here. Please do enlighten us. I mean, if we don't get 98% on maths, we kena already. So how do we develop something else that's going to make our kids love to learn?
Okay, I think that's a really, really tough question, right, being Asian. The first thing I think that is very important is to challenge ourselves to look beyond grades. I think as Asians, we have placed a lot of emphasis on grades. So the first challenge as parents or as individuals is to look beyond grades and comparison. We need to understand that grades is not everything for our children. And also another thing is that we also need to emphasize on the growth mindset. So instead of just having a fixed mentality that academic success is everything and it will determine success, we need to understand that in learning, or when a child goes to school or obtain grades, what we really want them to enjoy or what we really want them to learn is to enjoy the process, and in the process of it, understand that they are able to develop various skills and talents. So when that process happens, real learning takes place, a change takes place, and the child will naturally enjoy and understand what they are actually reading and doing in their classrooms.
Okay, because most of the time it's just regurgitating, right? But that's the mindset of parents. You know, my kids must do well, you know, and then the teachers, okay, my class needs to get all A's or all B's. So which brings me to Alina. I'd like to find out your perspective as a teacher, the whole IQ, EQ debate, and how would you develop a child's EQ in the classroom when they're expected to perform well academically as also?
I think the debate between EQ and IQ has gone on long enough for us to generally agree that they're both very important in very different ways. So IQ is more like, you know, a score from a standardized assessment. EQ is more towards, you know, how do you manage your emotion, self-regulation, self-awareness, empathy, and all that. But now, as we move towards a world that is more automated, technologically inclined, knowledge has become some sort of a commodity already. It's at the tip of our fingers. So it doesn't really matter what you can remember anymore. It doesn't really matter what you can regurgitate anymore. But what matters now is how do you apply those knowledge? How do you use those knowledge for good? So if you were to tell me, if I were to ask you a question, a historical question, Elaine, it doesn't matter if you saw it from your smartphone. It doesn't matter. But how do you apply those knowledge is what is important. So how do you teach this in a school that emphasize academic achievement, emphasize standardized assessment? I think it should be a revolution throughout. So it's very important for them to be able to learn hands-on, because that's where they would remember things.
Okay.
So if we were to create a model of the event where Parameswara founded Malacca and all that, just creating those events as a fact, and then ask them, if you were Parameswara, how would you have done it? So that's where the critical thinking comes in. So history doesn't have to be just factual. It can also be a reflection of how would you do it if you were that.
Okay. More in layperson's terms, I mean, you know, we hear a lot about these terminologies, IQ and EQ, but in essence, what is it? You know, like, you know, we always hear, yeah, his IQ very high, you know, the person has no EQ at all, you know, that kind of thing. So maybe, you know, with your expertise, you can explain to us a little bit further what these two actually do mean.
So IQ refers to intelligence quotient. It's actually a psychometric measurement, all right? But in layman's term, it's basically referring to a child's intellectual development. So their ability to think, their ability to reason, their ability to even remember, analyze, and things like that. It refers to their intellectual skills. Whereas for EQ, emotional quotient, we are looking more at emotional intelligence. So that reflects on a person's ability to identify with their own emotions. So to be aware of my own feelings, to be able to label my feelings appropriately, and not only that, but to be able to manage my feelings and express it constructively. That's one part to emotional intelligence, about self-awareness, awareness of our own feelings. But another part to emotional intelligence is also the awareness of other people's emotions.
I think EQ is very important because it's a part of a child's emotional development. From the psychological point of view, we would like to see a child developing holistically, so that includes their physical development, their cognitive development, and then their social-emotional development. And in the world today, and basically in a child's development, it's very necessary for them to be able to relate well with other people. It reflects their social competence. So basically for children who have good social competence, they tend to have good friends, and it generally helps them in their later development as well. For children who develop into adults who have high emotional intelligence, they are able to consider the perspective of others without compromising their own perspective. And apart from that, they are also emotionally resilient. Now, when a child is emotionally resilient, they are willing to persevere through challenges. And I think that that's very important for them in every situation, and it would definitely be beneficial for them in their work life.
Based on your statistics, do kids have that 50-50 balance? Is it something that we look at in Malaysia? Are we very EQ-centered?
I think at this point of time in Malaysia, we are still very IQ-centered.
Okay.
So we're still depending a lot on grades and intelligence rather than EQ.
Okay, which is changing if the whole education system is in Alina's hands. So Alina, what's your perspective on this? I mean, the balance between IQ and EQ.
I think historically, in the earlier 20th century, everybody was pushing for IQ because that was the only test to see, human potential. After a while, critics and researchers came out and said, you know what, there's actually other things that we can think about. There are other criteria that makes this person successful other than his intelligence. And I think it's very, very important for us to nurture both IQ and EQ. And especially now that most of the things that are around us are automated, EQ has become more important. We need to empathize more, because if everything else is being done by robots, then our role is just to be human. And our role is to empathize with people. We talk about big data and data analytics and all that. But what does data analytics mean without empathy? If I see a certain amount of percentage saying that, this many people is hungry in the world, if I don't have empathy, but I can analyze this big data, it doesn't really do anything for the world.
EQ is definitely one of the things that is a big consideration for future employers. Possessing a strong EQ, being able to manage your emotions, being able to rationalize with your emotions, being able to strategize, have problem-solving skills, would definitely benefit children today. So it's very important these days. When you go to any schools, 21st century learning and teaching is what the ministry is trying to push forward. So collaborative learning is very, very important. And this only, you can see the students who has higher EQ thrive in environment like this. And students who would like to be by themselves don't do very well in this. So it's very important for teachers to understand this and to help groom all students to be able to be in any kind of situations.
How significant or critical is the early years for parents to help grow a child's emotional development? Julie?
Okay, I think I briefly mentioned it earlier on,
Yep.
that the early years are really, really important. A working paper from the Center of Developing Child from Harvard University actually mentioned that the early years, or the young children, or the emotional development of young children basically builds into the architecture of their brain later on. So what it basically means is that emotional development, or the stimulation of their EQ, will basically be part of their growth in their later life, and it determines their school success, social competence, and other areas of their development. So the early years is definitely very critical.
Okay, now when it comes to food and diet, Celeste, what is the best way to improve a child's IQ and EQ?
I think early childhood nutrition is very important, even if you say start from pregnancy. Okay, that's where the brain start develop during pregnancy, then after that it grow even faster in the first 2 years, then it further meet up to 90% of adult size in 5 years time. Okay. So we can know the speed of the growing is very fast in the first few years, so that's the crucial of nutrition have to come in.
Okay, but then, you know, how it affects or improves the IQ and EQ, does it depend on how much protein you have, how much, you know, vegetables you take in? I think as a layperson and as a mother of a kid, I'd like to know that as well.
Has been in the market or research about all these DHA and ADA and all these nutrients that is good for the brain development, and those are the things that it's actually evidence-based, as in it actually show improvement for their brain development.
DHA and ADA, these two key nutrients has been advocates in the 2 decades in kids nutrition. And now latest, I think they found with another new research study where this MFGM, milk fat global membrane, this is another new research that even for myself that I found something is quite new, because it's already there for quite some time. The evidence show that it actually helps for the brain or emotional part rather than just only for IQ.
But of course the outside environment also important to stimulate it. Rather than just only from the food and nutrients itself.
How does good nutrition in early childhood contribute to overall development of a child's IQ and EQ? And can you please tell us about this scientific breakthrough component, MFGM, milk fat globule membrane? Can you tell us a little bit about that, please?
This is a new developed or emerging nutrients that they found inside the milk membrane itself.
Okay.
So, and it consists of a lot of the nutrients that is actually to develop the whole brain.
MFGM itself is consists of like protein, cholesterol, and also protein polar lipids in the membrane of the fats itself. So from there is actually the crucial nutrients that it build the brain cell, and from there is actually show like it build up or develop more in the brain nutrients. That one is already something enhanced or added into the brain development that it helps for the children's brain growth. How it helps in the EQ, the more crucial, I think it makes how the cell it works in the brain, so it's the fast impact or the action, and then it also develop for memories or emotional.
And for that one, actually it has, based on the research that it show, it actually helps for the cognitive and emotional development for young children, and then that is the base for them to grow up, because the research is actually based on a study of a group of 80 or 90 children, 4 years old class, and then they separate into 2 groups. So one group is for those who are enrichment with the MFGM, and then the other group is just a normal milk. And then after a period of time, then they found it the group of child who actually consumed the milk with enrichment. So they found it the survey from their cognitive EQ behavior, so it showed something higher marks. It's better compared to the groups of the child who didn't take the enrichment milk. Okay. So from there, it's actually show that even just like your daily nutrition consumption, it helps a little bit more on the EQ side.
So it sounds like a magic ingredient. What was the difference that was shown between the 2 groups? One which took, the enriched milk, and one which took the normal milk.
I think it's more for the internalizations behavior and also externalization behavior. So those are the 2 parts that they show for the children who actually with the enrichment milk. So internally, their behavioral and they are more focused, and then they also can be more, as in like awareness, or their self-awareness is higher compared to the other groups.
That certainly is a breakthrough, isn't it?
Yes, because all the while we know that DHA, all these nutrients is helpful for brain development, but we only think about, maybe it's just the size, maybe it's just some things that, you have a bigger growth. you learn something faster. But actually it's really proven as in like it helps for at least as a base, you already grow faster, the connections, everything is actually faster compared to those who are not enriched with the nutrients.
DHA and MFGM is something that they have to consume rather than generated naturally in the body. So I think we still have to get it from external source. If both works together, then definitely it will help for the brain development. And especially if you say for crucial stage, where for early stage, where the brain development quite fast in the early childhood. Besides for the memory, I think it's also, it touched a little bit for the cognitive and emotional growth for the children.
Okay, so now I understand it. So everything connects faster in comparison to having it over. And that's why kids grow up so fast these days, because there's such
I think they
wonderful
act very
things.
fast as well.
But seriously, I mean, like, you know, parents have no school to go to, you know, and how would they know these things if they were brought up the exact same way? And, you know, they always say that, you know, how you bring up your children is how you were brought up. More often than not, you know. So how would you recommend, you know, as, you know, someone who deals with these kind of things all the time, where kids nowadays as early as 3-4 years old are starting to see child psychologists and all that, how do we make them future ready when the parents are still not super future ready?
Yeah, so I guess awareness starts through education in some sense. Actually, in a lot of sense, it starts through education. The way to get message through to parents, I find that in Malaysia is always through the schools, through the teachers, through the education, because parents are still so concerned about the child's grades. And if teachers can come alongside us and work together and say that, hey, apart from grades, let's build up these skills.
Yes.
I'm sure parents would listen.